Look at him, he can't even march straight." The laughter rang out across the training yard, cruel and sharp, echoing off the sun-bleached barracks. Dust rose in choking clouds as recruits stamped in step, their boots striking the earth in mechanical rhythm. All except one. Eli stumbled. His foot struck unevenly, his arms swung out of time. He was tall but wiry, his uniform still stiff from issue, his boots worn down from years in the fields. To the other recruits, he looked like a joke, a misplaced farmhand who had no business wearing the olive drab of a soldier. "Careful, hayseed," one recruit shouted, grinning as others joined in. "Don't trip over your own plow." Another laughed louder. "Should have stayed with the cows. They march straighter than you." The recruits roared, slapping each other's shoulders as if their cruelty were sport. And Eli, quiet, awkward, with hands more used to pushing a plow than holding a rifle, said nothing. His face burned, but he lowered his gaze, and the dust of the training yard swallowed his humiliation. For the others, boot camp was a proving ground of ego. For Eli, it was a gauntlet of ridicule. He endured it in silence, though each word pressed heavy on his chest. What none of them saw, what none could imagine, was that silence was his sharpest weapon. Before boot camp, Eli had known only the endless cycle of farm life. Dawn broke with the cries of roosters. His father's voice followed, stern but weary. The air always smelled of tilled soil and cut hay, and his hands were permanently stained with earth. He had grown up in a world where seasons dictated survival, where patience was not a virtue but a necessity. Rain never came when you wanted, crops never grew when you begged them to. He learned to wait, to endure, to keep steady, no matter how harsh the storm. His mother had died when he was 12, leaving silence in the house that even the ticking clock could not fill. His father grew harder after that, pouring all discipline into Eli's back. The boy's shoulders bent under the weight of farm tools and responsibility long before he carried a rifle. Yet, beneath that silence burned something else. Eli's older brother, Caleb, had gone to war 2 years earlier. Caleb had written letters home, his words brimming with pride, until one day the letters stopped. The family received a folded flag instead. His father wept only once behind the barn, where no one could see, and from that moment on, Eli knew his path was sealed. He enlisted not out of glory, but out of duty, to honor his brother, to give his father something more than grief. But the farm had not prepared him for the mockery of other young men, each desperate to prove himself louder, stronger, prouder than the rest. The laughter followed Eli everywhere, into drills, into the mess hall, into the barracks at night. He became the target of endless jeers, the farmer's son, the clumsy recruit, the boy too soft for war. Then came the day of the rifle range. The recruits lined up in the blazing sun, rifles freshly oiled, barrels gleaming. Targets waited far downrange, their white circles daring each man to prove his worth. Eli stood at the far end of the line, his rifle heavy but familiar. Unlike marching, unlike drills, this he knew. The smell of oil and steel mingled with the faint memory of gunpowder back home. He remembered standing at the edge of a cornfield, an old hunting rifle pressed against his shoulder, waiting for crows that threatened the crop. Hours of silence, breath held, patience unbroken. A recruit nearby sneered, "Watch him miss the target completely." The command rang out. The line of rifles rose. Eli exhaled slowly, the noise of the camp fading until there was only the target and his heartbeat. The bullet struck dead center. He chambered another round. Crack. Again. The bullseye. Then another. And another. Each shot tore through the same small circle until the paper was a single, ragged hole. The recruits who had laughed fell silent, their grins fading into disbelief. One by one, their own shots scattered wide across the targets while Eli's remained perfect, tight, unshakable. By the time he lowered his rifle, the field was hushed. Boots crunched in the dirt behind them. A figure approached a man the recruits straightened instinctively for. The colonel. He was a veteran of wars older than these boys could imagine. his uniform heavy with ribbons, his eyes like flint. He stopped in front of Eli's target and studied the grouping. His silence stretched long, oppressive. Finally, he spoke. His voice carried the weight of command. "Who fired these shots?" The drill sergeant hesitated, then answered. "Recruit Eli, sir. Farmer's boy. Not much use elsewhere." The colonel's eyes shifted to Eli. For a heartbeat, the two men locked gazes, the weathered commander and the quiet farmhand. The colonel stepped closer, his voice low. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Eli's reply was barely more than a murmur. "Back home, sir. Crows in the cornfield." The colonel studied him for a long moment, then turned to the others, his voice rising like thunder. "You mocked him. You laughed at his hands, his boots, his silence. You saw weakness where there was strength. But look there," he pointed to the shredded target, "and tell me again that this man does not belong." No one dared speak. The colonel's words cut deeper. "Noise does not save you. Pride does not save you. In battle, laughter does not shield you. But patience, steadiness, silence, these will save you. And this man carries them like a weapon sharper than any blade." From that moment, the camp shifted. Some recruits whispered in awe, others muttered in jealousy. A few called it luck. The colonel heard them, and so he set a test. Moving targets. Long distance. Wind blowing hard against the shooters. A challenge designed to break the best of them. One by one, recruits missed, their bullets scattering against the dirt. When Eli's turn came, the others leaned in, waiting for his failure. He lifted the rifle, his heartbeat slowed. He remembered dawn fields and waiting hours for a crow to stir. He remembered Caleb's letters, the weight of duty. Crack. The first target dropped. Crack. The second spun. Again and again, his bullets found their marks, each shot tighter, cleaner than the last. Finally, the colonel pointed to the farthest target, barely visible on the horizon. "Hit it." The crowd murmured it was impossible. Eli squinted, breath slow and steady. His finger tightened. The steel plate rang faintly in the distance. Silence fell. Then, awe. From that day, the laughter stopped. The recruits who had mocked him now watched him with respect or shame. Some approached him, stumbling over apologies. "I was wrong about you. Guess we know who we want watching our backs." Eli offered no gloating, no bitterness. He only nodded, his silence holding a quiet grace. He became, without asking, a standard in the camp. When others faltered, they steadied themselves by watching him. When fear gnawed at them, they remembered his patience. Even the drill sergeant spoke softer when his name was mentioned. The colonel, though distant, watched closely. And though his face betrayed little, there was approval in his gaze whenever it lingered on Eli. On the eve of deployment, the colonel gathered them once more. His voice was sharp, his words etched to last. "In the field, you will face chaos. You will face fear. You will face noise so loud it drowns the thoughts in your head. And in that storm, the loudest men will often fall first. Remember this. The ones who endure are not always the strongest or the loudest. Sometimes, they are the quietest. Sometimes, they are the ones you least expect." He gestured toward Eli. "Remember him. Remember what silence can do." The recruits never forgot. Years later, long after the war had carried them into battles too dark to speak of, they still remembered that day. The day the farmer's son silenced their laughter with nothing but patience and a rifle. In foxholes, in choking mud, in nights where fear pressed like a suffocating hand, some of them steadied themselves by recalling Eli's calm. His silence lived on in them, a quiet reminder that ridicule does not define a man, endurance does. They mocked him. They scorned the farmer's son, calling him clumsy, misplaced, unworthy. But when the colonel saw his shot, grouping perfect circles punched into the bullseye, with unshakable patience, the truth was revealed. He had never needed their approval. He had only needed silence. And, in that silence lived the patience of the soil, the strength of loss, and the dignity of endurance. Eli's story is not only his own. It is a reminder that strength often hides in quiet men, that honor is not always loud, and that sometimes, when the world mocks, silence fires straight and true. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from in the comments. Tell us, have you ever been underestimated, only to prove them wrong in silence? Subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet heroes, the ones whose strength is not in noise, but in patience, endurance, and dignity. Because sometimes, the loudest voice in the room is silence.